Welcome to Meeple Mentor. I'm Jared and we're about to play City of the Big Shoulders. Let's take a look. I'll show you how. As I go over everything, feel free to pause the video as needed to follow along with your copy of the game. Make sure to like and subscribe below the video so you don't miss any of my latest content. I'll be teaching the full advanced game as described in the rulebook. I'm using upgraded tokens in my copy of the game, which came from the expansion called Burden of Destiny. I also have a helpful tip for you. Since the game involves a lot of buying and selling, I want to point out that if you have a set of poker chips in various denominations, you should use that instead of any of the provided paper money or cards. Using chips will eliminate about 30 minutes of money management during the game. In my copy, I custom made a money organizer with cardboard and glue. It keeps the cards of money stacked nicely. City of the Big Shoulders is a heavy Euro economic game set in the decades between 1875 and 1925. The game takes place after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 in Chicago's Golden Age, which led to a 50-year economic boost. Many historic and iconic companies are represented, like Oscar Mayer or Schwinn Bicycles. Each player takes on the role of an investor at this time and will be able to start new companies, buy and sell stock, run an efficient factory, hire employees, and produce and sell goods. Now let's take a look at how to set up the game. Lay the board out in the center of the table. Place the decade marker at 1875 to mark the first of 5 rounds. Place the phase marker on the first space of the phase track. From the resource cubes, place 2 of each color cube on the Haymarket square. Then put the rest of the cubes in the black bag. Shake it up and draw 3 cubes to place on each of the squares in the supply chain area, including the space with the X. Create a bank of all the money nearby the board. Create supply piles near the board for the workers, managers, salespersons, goods, automation tokens, and appeal bonus tokens. Separate out the 5 starting capital assets, which you can tell from the money symbol shown here. Place the one called Brilliant Marketing onto the $80 space. Shuffle the remaining 4 and place them face up on the rest of the spaces. Take the rest of the capital asset tiles and shuffle them into a deck. Place that face down to the left, shuffle all the gold cards and draw 5. Discard the rest. These 5 should sit face up near the board. Take all the demand tiles and separate them into 4 stacks, matching the number of pips shown on the back of each. If you're playing with 2 or 3 players, you'll need to remove some tiles from the stacks. For a 2-player game, remove the tiles labeled for 3 or 4 players, as shown on the bottom. For a 3-player game, remove only the tiles with the 4-player label. Shuffle each stack separately, then place the stacks on top of each other in order so the 1 pip's back tiles are on top. Place this deck near the board by the demand area. Draw tiles off the top of this deck and place them in the demand area, starting with the top right space. Fill each empty spot going down from the right column to the left column. Similarly, create 3 separate stacks of the buildings based on the pips shown on the back. Like the demand tiles, look through these and remove the tiles that are not needed for 2 or 3-player games. Shuffle each stack separately. Place each stack on the matching building spaces on the board. Place 4 workers on the 4 darkened worker spaces in the job market. Each player should choose a player color to be and take the matching player aid. There's red, blue, green, and yellow. Each player should take 1 stock bump guide in addition to the 6 partner meeples in their color. Deal out 3 building tiles to each player from the stack of 1 pip buildings. You may keep them all or play with the drafting rules. To draft, choose 1 from the 3 given to you to keep and pass the others to your left. Continue choosing 1 at a time and passing until you have 3 buildings. Additionally, everyone should take $175 from the bank. Each player places 1 partner meeple on the appeal track on this space, and on the number 3 square matching their color row. Everyone should have an equal opportunity to review each company charter and their differences. Players should review the state of the demand for each type of good, as shown by the 4 rows of demand tiles. Keep in mind the available resources shown in the supply chain as well as the 3 buildings that you're holding. Based on all this information, everyone will choose and start one company. They'll take the company charter and its 2 associated company discs. First, randomly determine a first player to choose first. After they choose their company, proceed counterclockwise to let everyone pick one. The last player to choose their company should take the priority deal marker, which looks like a train. Starting with the player holding the priority deal marker and going clockwise, each player places a partner meeple on the action phase turn track on the board. The priority deal player will be first, leaving the person who had chosen their company first going last in turn order. To officially start the company chosen, first take the company charter and sit it near you. Place all its associated stock certificates on it. Then you must choose the company's starting stock value, which must be one of the 4 values shown in the darkened share value spaces. You must buy the director's certificate worth 30% of the company. Each company will have a maximum of 10 shares, so each share is worth 10%. Therefore, the price you would pay from your personal money is 3 times the starting stock price. This money is paid to the company's treasury. Then, take the director's certificate and place it in front of you. The bottom area of the company charters will hold its money, unsold stock certificates, produced goods, and resources. This is always separate from your personal money and stock certificates owned. Anytime you try to start a new company, you must have enough money to buy 3 shares of its starting stock. If you can't afford it, you cannot open it, at least at that stock value. Look at the top right corner of the charter to find the starting appeal number. You'll also see what type of goods the company produces by the symbol shown. Place the second company disc on the appeal track on its starting number. Do not take any bonuses shown. If you place your token on the same space as another player's, it should go on the bottom of the stack. For this reason, it's important to set up the starting companies for the game in turn order. Since everyone starts with $175, you won't be able to open a company at $60 a share at the start of the game, since you would need at least $180. Next, take enough black automation tokens from the supply to cover the octagonal spaces at the bottom of each factory in the charter. Finally, place one of your partner meeples in the bottom corner of the rightmost factory shown. You only need to put out the partner meeple there for your starting company of the game. For any other companies you open, do not do this. This should leave you with 2 partner meeples in front of you and any remaining money that you haven't spent. Now everything is set up and you're ready to play. The game plays through 5 rounds, which thematically takes place over a new decade each round. At the end of the 5th decade, each of the 5 goals awards $200 to whoever earned it. Then everyone sells whatever shares they have at the final stock price to cash out. Whichever investor has the most money will win the game. This disc will keep track of which decade you're in. Players start with one business that they own and a small sum of money to get them started. It's important to distinguish a player's money and the company's money. Players will spend their own money to various companies in order to buy stocks. The actions and operations of a company always spend money from its own treasury, kept on its charter. Remember to keep this money separate. Each round of the game goes through 5 phases, which is kept track of on the board here with a black disc. The first phase of a round is called the stock phase. During this phase, players will take turns selling stock and then buying 1 stock certificate per turn. You'll want to buy stock in your own company, but also in opponents' companies. As they operate and sell goods, owning shares will end up paying you dividends. Starting in the 2nd decade, players may also start a new company. Once everyone has all passed consecutively, the phase is over. The next phase is the building phase. Players will have 3 building tiles in their hand. Each player chooses and places one of these face down on the board. After everyone's placed their buildings, they're all flipped over and become action spaces for the next phase. Out of the remaining 2 buildings, one is discarded and the other is kept for a future round. Once you enter the 3rd decade, everyone collects 1 more partner in their color. During the action phase, the companies you control get to send out partners to the game board to take available actions. The buildings and squares on the board with a beige background are all 1 partner at a time actions. The green background squares with the infinity symbol are action spaces with no limit to the number of workers that can occupy it. Your partner pieces are shared among the companies that you own. However, if taking an action for a specific company, the money spent for it should come from that company's treasury. Each company's treasury is independent of each other's. Likewise, you may not spend your personal money to perform an action for your company. The turn order during the action phase is always found here, as shown by the order of everyone's partner on the turn track. After everyone's spent their partners, proceed to the operating phase. Each company gets a turn to buy resources they need to operate factories in their charter. The order each company goes is determined by its appeal on the appeal track, the highest appeal to lowest appeal. The colored cubes are the resources you'll need. You've got pink for livestock, blue for steel, brown for wood, and black for coal. They must be purchased from the supply chain area or traded 2-to-1 at the Haymarket Square. You'll also need workers or automation to run a factory. If you successfully produce goods, you may sell them to the demand row, matching your company's type of goods. The different types of company goods are meat packing, dry goods, shoes, and food and dairy products. The revenue earned can either pay out dividends to stockholders or withhold the revenue to the company's treasury. Depending on what you choose, your stock price will go up or down. The final phase of each round is the cleanup phase. All demand tiles that are completely full of goods are removed from the game, and remaining ones shift over to the right. Then the last capital asset here is removed, and the rest slide down to refill one new asset tile. The resources in the supply chain area are refreshed, and new demand tiles are drawn to fill any gaps. That was a top-level look at the game, but there's much more to it, so let's look more deeply at each phase of a round. The first phase of each round is the stock phase. Starting from the player with the priority deal marker, players will take turn after turn in this phase going clockwise. On a turn, you can take a stock action, start a new company, or pass. In the first decade, you won't be able to start a new company. I've already explained how to start a company, so refer to that for any new company. If you pass, it doesn't stop you from taking future actions in this phase. The stock phase only ends after everyone has passed their turn in succession. When this happens, pass the priority deal marker to the player to the left of the person who last did a stock action. To take a stock action, you may first sell as many stocks as you like. Then you may buy one stock certificate from any company owned by any player. When selling stock, the stock certificates are placed in the bank pool. Look at the current stock price for the company. Multiply the share price by the number of shares sold. Collect this much money from the bank and place it in front of you in your personal supply. Then the company's stock tracker decreases by 1 for each share of stock sold. Each company has a preferred certificate which is worth 2 shares. So if selling this, gain 2 times the stock price and decrease it twice. A player cannot have both the director's certificate and the preferred certificate in a single company. Also, if buying the preferred certificate, you must buy double the current share price in one action. You may not trade in 2 normal shares for it. You may not sell the director's certificate unless an opponent owns 30% or more of the company. After selling stock on your turn, you may buy 1 stock certificate. You can buy stock certificates from the bank if there are any in the bank pool, or directly from the company. Pay the current share price to the bank or to that company's treasury, respectively. Opponents may not refuse to sell stock to someone, and no one is allowed to own more than 60% of a company. Additionally, players have a limit to the number of stock certificates or cards that they're allowed to have overall. The bank pool on the board shows the maximum allowed based on player count. You're not allowed to sell stock in one company and then buy stock from it in the same decade. However, you could buy stock first and then sell it. Either way, after selling a company's stock, you may not buy any more of that company for the rest of this round. Whoever starts a company is the director and owns the director's certificate. However, it's possible to lose your company to an opponent. There are several ways directorship will transfer to someone else. If an opponent gains more share ownership than the director, the transfer happens. Also, if the director sells enough shares to now own less than an opponent, the transfer would happen there too. You may not sell your director's certificate unless an opponent also owns at least 30% of the company. To transfer the company to another player, the current director gives the new owner the director's certificate. In return, they will receive from that player the preferred certificate if they own it, and a common certificate, or 3 common certificates. The company charter now goes to the new owner, and everything on it goes too. From now on, the new director of the company will get to take actions on behalf of it. If a player should lose directorship and 2 opponents are tied for most control, then the first player on your left becomes the company's director. It's possible you may lose directorship of your starting company before having earned your extra partner meeple. If that's the case, place it into the bank pool. You'll get a chance to earn it later. At the end of the stock phase, any company that is completely owned by players will increase one step on the stock track. There would be no stock certificates of that company on its charter or in the bank pool. Move the phase tracker to the building phase icon. During the building phase, players will simultaneously choose a building tile from their hand to add to the game board. These building tiles will become action spaces available to anyone. In the first round, everyone should already have 3 building tiles to choose from. The chosen building tile is placed face down in the lowest numbered space in their matching colored row on the board. Once everyone has placed their tiles, they'll all flip face up. From the 2 remaining building tiles in your hand, choose one to keep for future rounds and one to discard from the game. After the first round, at the start of this phase, deal 2 building tiles to each player from the building stacks on the board. Start with the 2-pip buildings until they are exhausted. Then move to the 3-pip tiles, which won't be used until the 4th and 5th decades. That way, you'll always have 3 buildings to choose from. After all the building tiles are flipped up, count how many workers are found in the bottom right corner of all the tiles just placed. Add that many workers to the job market area to the left. They get added from top to bottom, most expensive to least expensive. In the 3rd decade, remember that each player can now pick up their partner meeple from space 3 of the building rows. It can be used in the action phase this decade. Should you ever have questions on what the buildings do specifically, check the reference in the rulebook that starts on page 33. The next phase is the action phase. Move the phase tracker to the action phase icon. The turn track on the right of the board shows the turn order to take actions in this phase. Actions are taken one at a time using the partner meeples available to you. The only way to change the turn order for this phase is for someone to take this action found on the board here. It's known as the advertising and start player action space. So how do you take an action? Place one of your partner meeples on the board on one of the available action spaces. All the green spaces show an infinity symbol in the corner. All of these spaces have no limit to the number of partners that can take the action and occupy the space. The brown bordered action spaces, including all the building tiles players have placed, are 1 use each. At the start of the game, everyone has 2 partners to use. You may gain up to 3 more during the game. The partner placed on your starting company will become unlocked once you operate all the factories in it during one operating phase. I'll explain more on that later. Another partner automatically comes to you at the start of the 3rd decade. Lastly, the first time one of your companies advances to the Gain a Partner bonus space on the appeal track, you'll get to take that one. Your partners are not tied to any one of the companies you own. Instead, each turn you decide which of your companies you're performing the action for. This is important as only that company will gain the benefit, and the cost of that action must be paid by the company receiving the benefit. One company cannot fund the action of another, and your personal money cannot fund any partner actions. Before I go over the basic actions on the board, I need to point out the symbols that indicate who pays who. This image represents the bank, so this symbol altogether means the bank pays the player who owns the building. It is only found on building tiles and awards money to the person who placed it when the action is taken. This image represents a company, so this symbol means the bank pays the company. It's found on fundraising spaces that help your company gain money. Many of the buildings placed have this symbol on it, which means your company must pay the player who placed the tile. If you go to a building tile you own with a symbol, your company pays you. Another common symbol is this one, which means your company must pay the bank to take the action. The last one shows this icon for shareholders. So when taking the action, the company will pay dividends to all shareholders of stock in the company. I'll cover more on that later. This is the job market. You may place a partner here to purchase as many workers as you can afford and give jobs to. Pay the price for each one based on the cost shown underneath it. If there are no workers in the job market, you can buy them from the supply for $50 each. The workers will sit in your company's factories and are needed to operate them. The advertising and start player space is here and requires you to first pay $20 from the company treasury to the bank. Then that company moves up once on the appeal track and moves to the first space in the action phase turn track. Everyone else will slide down. When you go up on the appeal track, if you land on a bonus space, you'll gain it immediately. Also, if you land on someone else's disc, your company disc goes on top. If you should gain a bonus but either don't want it or can't take it, you may instead take $25 from the bank to the company's treasury. This action space is the dividend payment action. Each share will earn $10. the money is paid from the company, so if the company doesn't have at least $100 in its treasury, it may not take this action. The way this process works is the company pays the $100 to the bank, and then everyone collects $10 per share they own. The company itself will get $10 for each share it still owns as well. Then, because you paid dividends, you get to boost your share price. It will go up twice if your share price was $50 or less. It will go up only once if your share price was $60, $80, or $100. If your share price was higher than that, it won't go up at all. I'll cover how all that works in detail in the next phase. The fundraising action spaces are here, and more will slowly unlock as the building tiles are used. Placing a partner on these spots gains money from the bank directly to the company's treasury. Gain the amount shown on the money back. This action space lets you hire a manager. The light brown meeples are the managers and can be placed in factories in your company charter. The company pays $60 to the bank to gain one manager to place on a factory. Whenever that factory produces goods, the manager's ability will trigger. Since this is not green, it may only be taken once per decade. The space below it is similar as it allows you to hire a salesperson. The company pays $70 to the bank to take one salesperson from the supply and add it to their charter. They're placed on the left from top to bottom. Each salesperson in your charter increases the goods price that you can sell each good for. It can only be taken once per decade. The last action space, always available on the board, is the capital investment space. Any number of partners can be placed here. When going here, you may buy one available capital asset in the display below. The price for each is shown above it. The company must pay the money to the bank. Take the asset and place it on your charter on the capital space if you have one. Slide all the tiles to the right and refill one from the top of the stack. If the asset deck is empty, it will remain empty for the rest of the game. Some companies don't have a capital asset space, but may still purchase them for their one-time purchase bonus. These are found in the bottom right of the tile. You always gain the immediate bonus. If you already had a capital asset in the space, you may discard it if you like to make room for the new one. The asset may be used once each decade. As a free action during your turn in the action phase or operating phase, you may gain the reward on the capital asset. Sometimes there's a fee associated with gaining the benefit. If so, that money is paid from the company treasury to the bank. Since each capital asset's ongoing ability is usable once per round, you should exhaust it by flipping it over to remind you that you used it. For explanations on each capital asset, look in the rulebook starting on page 37. The red text describes each tile's immediate bonus when purchased. The black text is the tile's ongoing bonus, if your company charter can hold it. The game uses icons for certain one-time bonuses found on capital assets and on the appeal track. This is the worker icon. The bonus lets you take one worker from the supply and place them on an available worker space in a factory on a company charter you own. The gear icon is the automation bonus. To automate, choose a factory and remove the leftmost automation token and replace the leftmost worker token within the same factory. The now available worker pawn can be moved to other empty factory spaces within the same company. Note that you cannot automate a worker space if there's not a worker there first. If the worker pawn has nowhere to go in the company charter, it returns to the job market on the most expensive space available. If that's full, it returns to the supply. Typically, fully automating a factory will uncover bonuses which will produce extra goods when operating. The star icon with a number is the bonus to increase your company's appeal on the appeal track. Move the disc up by the number shown. You would gain any bonuses moved past or on. Once again, you may forfeit the appeal bonus to gain $25 to your company treasury. The appeal track has the one-time bonuses I just talked about, plus a few more. As one of your company's discs gains appeal, it moves down the track. The one-time bonuses are shown to the right. The darkly shaded Meeple icon is a bonus that lets the company gain one salesperson from the supply and add it to their charter. It's always placed on the topmost salesperson space in the charter, thereby increasing the sale price of each good sold. This icon with the arrow over the disc is a bonus that immediately increases your stock share price on the track. The good icon is a bonus that lets you gain one extra good after producing goods during the operating phase. To remember to do that, you take the appeal bonus good token and place it on the company charter. The picture of the partner is of course the bonus that lets you earn the specific extra partner meeple to use during the action phase. If you earn it during an action phase, you may use it in the same round. Each player can only gain this bonus once. Next comes the operating phase, which lets each company buy resources, produce goods, and sell them. Move the phase tracker to the operating phase icon. Companies take turns completing their operations and sales in order of their appeal. Check the appeal track for each company's disk location. The company with the highest appeal goes first, then down from there. For locations with a stack of company disks, the one on top goes first. The first thing your company has the option to do is emergency fundraising. It's not recommended unless you absolutely need cash. You can sell as many shares you want to the bank at the current share price shown on the track. Gain the money from the bank and add it to your company treasury. Then the company's stock value decreases one step for each share you sold, plus one. The extra one is a penalty from the Chicago Stock Exchange. Now you should look at what resources you need in your factories in order to produce goods. For example, this factory needs 1 steel and 1 livestock. Check the supply chain area at the top of the board. You may buy any resources in the 3 squares with prices shown above them. The price shown is the cost per resource. The company treasury must pay the cost to the bank. The resources in the X space cannot be purchased. It's to forecast the next available resources. If you want, you may trade any 2 identical resources for 1 other resource in the Haymarket Square. The 2 for trade should come from your company treasury, not from the supply chain squares. You can make as many trades as you want on your turn. You may keep as many resources as you like on your company charter, including between decades. Now you will have the chance to produce goods. Always start with the leftmost factory in the company charter. The factories must produce in order. If the one before it didn't produce, then that factory is not allowed to. In order to produce, all the worker spaces must be occupied with either worker pawns or the automation tokens. Place the resources required in the factory using it. Then you consume those resources by placing them into the Haymarket Square. You should take the number of goods tokens shown under the factory and add them to your charter. If any goods tokens are revealed, then the factory produces 1 extra as shown. So in this example, the factory produces 4 goods. Right after a factory produces, your manager's ability triggers if you have one there. A manager meeple can sit on these spaces. You'll gain the benefit on the right after the factory produces. This manager lets you take any 1 resource from Haymarket Square and increase the company's appeal by 1. Continue to the next factory to the right, 1 by 1 until you're done. You're not required to produce goods though. However, if you don't sell any goods, your share price will decrease 1 step. After all your factories produce, gain any additional goods tokens that you have due to the appeal bonuses collected. You may now sell whatever goods you have onto demand tiles in the demand area on the board. You may only sell your goods to the matching row of the type of good your company produces. Check the icon at the top right of your company charter to see which row you must sell to. You may keep goods not sold from round to round. Each demand tile can be sold a limited amount of goods. If all the spaces are filled, you may not sell goods to that tile. The price per good you sell is based on the price shown to the left of your charter. If you have salesperson meeples on it, you'll earn the highest amount shown next to the meeple. Salesperson meeples bought are always added from top to bottom in this section. If you place the last good on a demand tile to make it full, you gain a monetary bonus to your revenues earned. Filling a tile in the first column gives you an extra $50, and the middle column gives you a $20 one-time bonus. If you fill up both in 1 turn, you gain both bonuses. Keep a running tally of the money you should earn from sold goods and bonuses. The money will come from the bank, but don't take it just yet. From the total revenue earned, you must decide to either pay dividends or withhold the money. Withholding the money means the company keeps all the money and no shareholders get anything. And if you withhold the revenue, you must decrease your stock price 1 space on the track. Additionally, if you don't sell any goods, you automatically decrease the stock by 1. If you choose to pay dividends, calculate 1/10 of your total revenue and round down. An easy way to find this is to move the decimal 1 space to the left. So if you've earned $215, the dividend payment per share would be $21. This is paid per share to all the shareholders, so you should announce to everyone what the dividend payout is. Each player can calculate how much money they'll earn from the bank by multiplying the number of shares they own by the dividend payout. Players take the money owed to them from the bank, not from the company treasury. Remember that the director's certificate is worth 3 shares and the preferred certificate is worth 2 shares. For each share still in your company's treasury, take the payout amount from the bank for each and place it in the company's treasury. Any shares currently in the bank pool on the board do not pay out to anyone. The bank pays itself, but you don't need to track that. By paying dividends, the company has an opportunity to raise its share value on the stock track. As long as your payout is at least as much as the company's current share value, the stock will go up at least once. If you pay out double the current share price, the stock will go up 2 times. Once your share price is worth at least $60, you have the chance to bump up the stock 3 times by paying out at least 3 times the stock value. To remind you of the triple jump threshold, the board includes a bold line above the $60 share space. You can quickly use the stock bump guide to avoid having to do multiplication or division here. Look at the first column and find your current stock price, matching where your company's stock disk is on the stock track on the board. Now check the second and third columns next to it. If you paid out at least the amount shown in the second column, your stock goes up twice. Or if you paid out at least the amount shown in the third column, your stock goes up 3 times. After each company's operating turn, check the supply chain. If any spaces are empty, shift all the resources to the right from within one space to the next. Only move resources into empty spaces. If at least 1 cube is there, do not add to it. This shifting process continues until there are no empty spaces. This is how the cubes from the X space get moved into play. Now that the space is empty, draw cubes randomly from the bag to refill it. The number of cubes to draw changes depending on the decade that you're in. Check the number shown below the decade marker on the board to see how many you should draw to refill the space. If you ever try to draw cubes from the bag and it's empty, place all the resources from Haymarket Square into the bag and keep drawing. After you're done, refill Haymarket Square with 2 cubes of each resource color from the bag. After each company has done their operating turn, move on to the cleanup phase. Move the phase tracker to the cleanup phase icon. This is when you reset the board for the next decade. Any demand tiles that are completely filled are removed from the game. The goods tokens on them return to the general supply. From the empty spaces, shift all the demand tiles to the right within their row. Now, draw new demand tiles from the demand deck near the board to refill the gaps. Place them in on order of right to left, top to bottom. Check the diagram on page 29 for clarity on the refill order. Once the demand deck is empty, do not reshuffle any used tiles. Now, remove the rightmost capital asset tile sitting in the $40 space. It is out of the game. Slide all the rest of the asset tiles to the right, and draw 1 more from the stack to go on the $80 space. Next, look at the supply chain area. Remove any resources remaining in the $10 space and place them in Haymarket Square. Shift all the resources 1 space down at a time. Then draw cubes from the bag to refill the X space. Draw as many cubes as shown for the current decade you're in. Each player should collect their used partner meeples from the board. Then flip each company's capital assets face up in their charter to be used again in the next decade. Move the decade marker to the next decade and reset the phase marker back to the stock phase. The game will end after the operating phase of the 5th decade. There's no point to doing the cleanup phase since no more rounds will be played. First, resolve each gold tile that was laid out at the beginning of the game. Each gold tile will award $200 from the bank to the winning player. If 2 or more players are tied for a goal, all the tied players receive the full reward. I won't go over every tile in the game as the rulebook has some great reference pages near the back that describe each one that may appear in your game. The gold tiles are shown on page 32. Next, everyone should cash out their shares owned based on the final share price for each company. Do not lower the share price marker anymore. Everyone cashes out at the same time and the disc won't move. Any money left in a company's treasury is returned to the bank. Finally, everyone should count the money collected in their personal treasury. The player with the most money wins. If there's a tie, the winner will be the one who earned the most goals. If still tied, they share the victory. Keep the rulebook handy and check BoardGameGeek.com for FAQs and extra content. Check the video description for links to Big Viking Mats, Board Game Geek, Top Shelf Gamer for token upgrades, SleeveKings.com for a 10% off coupon on card sleeves, and Mr. Meeple t-shirts for cool board gaming shirts. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you found this teaching helpful. Stick around to watch another Learn to Play video. And remember, teach when you can, but always be learning. See you next time.